Okay, so I guess this question is a little bit more personal because I hear about it all the time. And I happen to be in one of my dad's email chains with his W&L buddies. And
There's no telling what you hear.
yeah, I know. And so or my dad at least, like frequently comments on, how different the school is today, how it's changed. It seems like the school, at least in his eyes, has lost a lot of its conservative values. What do you think about that? Have you seen these trends?
Well, I'm not sure. I think the most reassuring thing to me is I have a daughter and a son-in-law who graduated. A daughter graduated in 2003 and a son-in-law in 2000. And they're about as conservative as I am, so I don't know whether that's an accurate reading or not, but I still have a sense that the student body is pretty conservative, and I was happy to see the Spectator publishes here at W&L, so I haven't given up hope.
Okay, good. Any thoughts on the new president of school?
I don't know any more than what I read yesterday.
Okay.
So I hope he's going to be good.
I hope so too. Okay, I just wanted to see if you had an input on that. Do you want to ask some questions?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
I could have made a comment about Williams, where I would go to find somebody, but I'm glad I didn't say that.
So, Mr. Tucker, thank you very much for your talk. I really enjoyed listening to it. So when it comes to the book that you wrote most recently, 14 Conservative Heroes, one of them who you included was not a Republican, but a Democrat, Grover Cleveland. So I was wondering if you could explain a little bit as to why he stood out to you so much as one of the 14 most prominent, most meaningful conservatives for your book.
Well, actually, a number of the 14 were Democrats, and so I was trying to impress everybody with bipartisanship, but there weren't any recent Democrats that were among the 14. But the theme of the book, or my definition, I think a general definition of conservatism certainly embodies smaller government, less regulation, less government, more personal liberty. And that was a great definition of Grover Cleveland's career as a politician and as president. I love the fact that he vetoed more spending measures than any president before or after him, over 500 vetoes. He was just relentless in trying to wring the excess out of government. And it is interesting, as an amateur historian at least, to look back at in many ways, the Democratic Party in the 19th century was more Jeffersonian, more conservative than the Republican Party. The Republican Party was more the national party that had won the Civil War, and crony capitalism was pretty big in the Republican Party in the 19th century. But the Democratic Party, which had a very hard time winning a national election, but did under Grover Cleveland, was much more the party of states' rights, individual liberty, less government rather than more. And that continued on into one of the other heroes, is John Davis, W&L's John Davis, who was a Democrat also, and Davis was very much in the Cleveland mold of a Democrat. There are not very many Cleveland Democrats without that.
So another president that a lot of people probably wouldn't expect would be on a list of conservative heroes when they just think of them in their mind would be President Calvin Coolidge. And a lot of people say, well, Coolidge didn't do much as president. Why would you praise him or appreciate him when he didn't do much? So I guess my question is, from where do you derive the significance of Coolidge's administration, and do you think that we need one similar to his today?
Great. I would even go farther. I would argue that Calvin Coolidge was the most successful conservative president in American history, including Ronald Reagan. And the reason I would say that is because Reagan was in favor of reducing the size of government, but he actually was not able to do that. Partially because of the Democratic Congress, and partially because he was waging the Cold War at the same time that he was trying to reduce government. But Coolidge actually did reduce the size of government. He lowered taxes like Reagan. He did all the things Reagan did, but he went one step farther, and the government was actually smaller when he left office than when he came in. And I would argue that Coolidge is probably the most underrated president in American history. And interestingly, Reagan would agree with me. Reagan had Coolidge's portrait hung in the cabinet room, and Reagan was president. the press didn't understand that at the time, but Coolidge was an interesting person individually. He certainly had the reputation of being silent Cal, and most people, as you mentioned, think of him as not saying anything, not thinking anything, not doing anything, was just there. But if you go back and read Coolidge's speeches, and he wrote his own speeches, he left a very well-defined political philosophy. He was actually a politician who thought very deeply about the principles that he believed in, and in his speeches was very articulate in expressing those. He was not much of a small talker. He was not somebody you probably wanted to take a vacation with or hang around with at a cocktail party, but as a politician, a leader, and a president, he was exemplary, I believe.
So, as one more question, so the book 14 Conservative Heroes, for a lot of conservatives, especially in the modern era, we tend to look towards Ronald Reagan, or then jump all the way back to the Founding Fathers as people who we elevate as exemplars of how government should work and the statesmen who occupy it. And so, was a reason for you writing 14 Conservative Heroes the perception that we might need to have more kind of conservative-minded heroes in between Reagan and the Founding Fathers?
Yeah, I think probably the reason, there were two reasons I wrote it. One, so that conservatives today could think a little bit about the historical context and the fact that the conservative philosophy really is as old as the Republic itself. It goes all the way back to the beginning, and you can, there's certainly been times when it seemed more ascendant than others and more in decline, but you can really trace it starting with Jefferson and Madison and all the way down to Reagan. And so it's a philosophy that has been with us since the beginning. And then the second thing is, it's certainly my hope that we don't stop with 14, and certainly believe and hope that we'll have a 15th and 16th, many more.
All right, thank you very much. That's all for me, but if any of these guys have questions as well. So, pleasure
Great.
meeting you, sir.
Great to see you. Now you're with the Spectator.